What would you do if a simple night out turned into your worst nightmare? In this video, we dive deep into the shocking case of Tracy Woodford, a case so disturbing that even the police were left speechless. Just think if a man you'd never expect gets away with murder for far too long, and what did they find? It's something out of a horror movie. But this isn't fiction. It's real. You won't believe what they uncovered. Stick around because this one will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about true crime. A day that began like any other. It's hard to imagine that a seemingly normal day could spiral into something so horrific that even the most seasoned police officers would be left speechless. But that's exactly what happened in the small town of Pontypridd, Wales, on April 21st, 2015. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, for 47-year-old Tracy Woodford. Tracy was a woman who led a simple life. Born on February 13, 1968, she was described by her family and friends as a gentle soul, someone who lived her life without much fuss. She lived with her mother, Linda, and her brother, Sean, and the three were very close. On that fateful day, Tracy's plans weren't out of the ordinary. She had tea with her brother Sean in the morning and mentioned that she was planning to go into town to buy a ring. Harmless, right? Just a regular day of running errands. But little did anyone know, this would be the last time anyone in her family would see her alive. The last moments in town. The town of Pontypridd isn't the sort of place where things like this happen. It's a quiet town, filled with people who know each other and go about their business. On that afternoon, Tracy did exactly what she said she would. She went into town, bought her ring, and stopped at a few local pubs along the way. Now, Tracy wasn't a heavy drinker. Actually, far from it. She had a very low tolerance for alcohol, and that day, it seemed like she was feeling the effects of it a bit more than usual. As fate would have it, at around 7:45 p.m., she walked into the Skinny Dog pub, where she met a man named Christopher May. Christopher, a 50-year-old local, was known around town. Some said he was friendly and always ready for a joke, but as the night went on, it became clear that his interest in Tracy was far from innocent. They started talking, and eventually, by 11:30 p.m., they were seen leaving the pub together. At that moment, no one could have predicted the darkness that was about to unfold. A missing person's nightmare. Now, here's where things start to take a turn for the worse. After Tracy and Christopher left the pub, she never made it home. Her family immediately grew concerned. I mean, who wouldn't? When someone you care about doesn't come home, and it's completely out of character for them, panic sets in. Tracy's family did what any family would. They tried to call her, and when they couldn't reach her, they contacted the police. Meanwhile, back at Christopher's flat, something eerie was going on. Neighbors reported hearing a loud thud in the middle of the night, but they didn't think much of it. Christopher was known to come home drunk, and they assumed it was just one of his usual nights. But this wasn't a normal night. The next day, Christopher went to work with visible scratches on his face, offering up a bizarre explanation. He said he'd had an accident with a pole, but it didn't take long for the police to connect the dots and trace Tracy's last moments back to Christopher. A grisly discovery. When officers showed up at Christopher's flat on April 24th, they weren't expecting what they found. Christopher was hesitant to let them in at first, but eventually, he caved. As soon as the police walked in, they were hit with a foul stench. Just imagine walking into a room and immediately knowing something was terribly wrong. One officer described the smell as a mixture of rotting meat and cat urine. Christopher tried to explain that Tracy had left after he made an inappropriate offer, but the police weren't buying it, and their suspicions were confirmed when they started searching the flat. What they found was horrifying. Tracy's dismembered body was in the bathroom, hidden away in bags. Her torso was found stuffed inside an Adidas rucksack, and her other body parts were placed in her handbag. But there was something even more chilling. Her head was missing. A killer's confession. At this point, the police knew they were dealing with something beyond what they had imagined. Christopher confessed to hiding parts of Tracy's body in a storm drain. On April 25th, Police found her severed head and additional remains in a red bag inside the drain. Just think about this for a second. The man had been walking around with her head in a rucksack like it was nothing. That detail alone sent shivers down the spine of everyone involved. But the horror didn't end there. During the investigation, it was revealed that Christopher May had once worked as a butcher. This fact alone explained the precision with which he had dismembered Tracy's body. His dark skills were now being used for something far more sinister than cutting meat. The courtroom drama. Later in 2015, when the trial began, the evidence against Christopher was overwhelming. The court heard emotional testimonies from officers, forensic experts, and Tracy's family. The prosecution argued that this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment killing. The premeditated nature of how Christopher dealt with Tracy's body after her murder suggested something much darker was at play. The defense tried to argue that Christopher had killed Tracy in a fit of rage after a disagreement, and even went as far as to claim self-defense. But the jury wasn't convinced. They saw through his lies, especially when evidence was found on his laptop that hinted at his disturbing interests. It became clear that this wasn't a simple crime of passion. This was something far more calculated. Justice for Tracy. In the end, justice was served. Christopher May was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The judge ruled that he would serve at least 28 years before being eligible for parole. Tracy's family, who had sat through the entire trial, were visibly emotional as the sentence was passed. Her mother, Linda, and brother, Sean, spoke about how their lives had been torn apart. Sean even mentioned that he struggled to sleep most nights, haunted by the thought of what had happened to his sister. But what really made this case stand out, what really left even the police stunned, was the sheer cruelty and callousness of it all. Christopher didn't just kill Tracy, he dismembered her, walked around with her severed head, and tried to cover it up in the most heartless way possible. It wasn't just a murder, it was a calculated, cold-blooded attempt to avoid detection. In the world of true crime, there are always stories that shock us. But this case? It shocked even the police. Tracy's life was taken in the most brutal way, and her family's grief was compounded by the horrifying details of the case. It's a story that reminds us all of the darkness that can lurk in seemingly ordinary places. And for those who knew Tracy, it's a nightmare that will never truly end. So that's the wrap-up of the shocking case of Tracy Woodford. If this story gripped you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and hit that subscribe button. We've got more chilling true crime stories coming your way, so stay tuned.